Thank you. We've had apologies from Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Pandor, Councillor Hinchcliffe, and Councillor Swift, for whom Councillor Scullion isn't attending today.
Item 2, declarations of disposable pecuniary interest. There are none. Item 3, exempt information, possible exclusion of press and public. I'm just clarifying that there are none. And everybody happy with the minutes of the meeting of the Combined Authority 22nd of July? Very good. Okay, so moving on to the crisis in the cost of living and doing business. Oh, I've got the wrong notes. I'm so sorry. I brought the wrong pack down. My apologies. So, welcome back, and we can now move on to item 5, the financial performance report, and that's you, Angela.
It is, thank you, Chair. So this is the regular report you get each time on various aspects of financial performance. So at this time of year, you've got the Q1 position for both capital and revenue. Also set out in this paper some information on our business planning and budget setting process, and it also strays a little then into emerging inflationary and other pressures. We are still doing some work on inflation, but I'll give you a little flavour of where we've got to ahead of it coming back to a future meeting. So the Q1 financial update, we've spent a bit more time on our Q1 update. Usually Q1 is quite a static sort of the first 3 months of the year. Things haven't really gone changed particularly from that budgeted, but this year clearly was a very different year. With inflation kicking in after we'd all set budgets. Obviously, we all did our budgets back in February, and then things went very very different. So we knew we'd have challenges this year. The whole bus industry is still unresolved after COVID, so we knew that was going to be a challenge this year. Inflation is clearly now coming into that, and on bus contract in particular, and we've had papers to the last. We had papers here, we had papers to the last Combined Authority meeting, there's another one coming this Friday about the pressure that the general economic situation and government funding and the impact of the pandemic is having on bus contracts. We have looked at the other inflation pressures briefly, and we'll come back in more detail over the next couple of months with that. But a number of our inflationary impacts will be deferred into next year because of the timing of contracts. Bus is the clear exception to that because they're hitting us now every week and every month. But a number of our contracts, where they're renewed annually, they come in either later this year or into next year. Have flag pay award, which in line with the local government pay offer that is on the table is it's a flat rate, but it's broadly around 4%. And we're looking at doing something similar within the Combined Authority, but that is not yet awarded. But that obviously is a pressure for us and the local authority partners, because when we all set our budgets, we all anticipated an extension of a sort of couple of percent was likely for a pay award, and that's now in the light of the inflationary pressures not going to be the case. So So there's quite a lot of moving parts. We'll bring you some more detail, certainly to the next meeting, and probably a level of detail around. I think we've talked about having options and when I think this year looks so far on track. We may be able to contain it broadly where we set out. We've got some positives in terms of some additional income on our investment income, but all the others are bigger costs. But we're hoping we'll get through this year. The challenge is setting a viable budget for next year, and we are diving into that process as we speak. So I'll come back to the capital. If I stick with that theme, and do stop me if there's any questions as I go, to say we started work on, we're starting to pull together the framework for budgeting for next year, with a focus on inflation, and that varies across different elements of our spend. So we're usually, rather than do a blanket approach to it, we are breaking it down into different elements. We're also obviously having to turn our minds to the cost of living crisis and how that might impact the services we choose to deliver next year, and the relative priorities. And again, I think that will come forward at the Combined Authority on Friday when we have that discussions there. So we are have started the budget planning, and Appendix 1 in your pack gives you a broad timetable. As always, we'll use this, well, as we did last year, we'll use this committee to take through the detail on the budget, but that will be supported by the Scrutiny Committee. Always like to have a look, and that's scheduled in for, I think, November. Governance and Audit will look at aspects such as the reserves and the Treasury Management Policy, but again, they can come here as well on the way through. So there'll be hopefully sufficient opportunity for members to help shape that budget and make the decisions. So we need to collate that information in a sensible way, and start to bring that forward. We've got another meeting of this committee in November, and we'll take a look whether we need to do any workshops in between to have a more detailed look at budget options. We are trying to do a 3-year picture. It gets quite challenging, but we need to try and get that forward visibility. So the timetable is there. It broadly mirrors what we've done last year, and we'll just keep bringing it back for affirmation, decisions, discussions.
Just while you find your place, Angela, just to say that thank you for answering your questions earlier in the week that I had on the paper and some of the numbers. But I think it might be worth, obviously it's very volatile at the moment with a new Prime Minister coming in. We don't know what her fiscal approach is going to be. There's going to be a fiscal event on the 19th of September. So I do think those workshops are a good idea, because we're going to have to respond in a very agile way. Also, I wonder, it would be useful just to give an indication of what our thinking is to help our local authorities and the people of West Yorkshire during the cost of living crisis. And I wonder if you could just say a little bit about that what our thinking is currently about potentially using some of the gain share.
Thank you. I can do that. So there is a full paper going to the Combined Authority on Friday, looking at the current position and cost of living. In there, we have highlighted some of the actions that the services, some of the projects, some of the interventions we currently have that help support that agenda, and whether we could do more of that. So whether it's capital projects, such as our rebiz, where we help with the energy efficiency in businesses, whether it is retrofit housing to make sure that the houses people are living in are warmer and they can afford to pay bills. We're also looking at whether we need to do something different, whether we need to be diverting some of the gain share perhaps from some of the allocations which are later in the appendix here. Do we need to be moving some of those to supporting local communities? And so there'll be a bit more detail, I think, on that on Friday. But that's very much, we're looking now at our in-year business plans. Do they need to be diverted slightly? And then certainly next year's, what are the key priorities for next year? We've got our investment priorities, but the cost of living, you've been very clear, Mayor, is absolutely our number one crisis facing us today, and we need to act on that.
Thank you. Food, warmth and mental health, I think, are the priorities that we were focused on. It's going to be quite a rocky ride over the next few months, I think. Have you come to the end of that presentation, Angela? Or
There's more so far.
just wondering if colleagues had any comments before Angela moved on? Mark?
Thank you, Matt. And I'm not sure, Angela, if you're coming to this or not coming to this, but I know the UK Shared Prosperity Fund is referenced in the paper, I think in 2.23. Obviously, that provides a potential new source of funding, and it potentially can give us some flexibility on investments we make, in particular in the area of business support. We also have gain share. So I think my question is, when might we be in a position to look at UK Shared Prosperity Fund, obviously when we've heard back from government following the submission of our bid, and how we bring that into the business planning approach for both this year and next year?
Excellent question. You are right. We've the Combined Authorities approved the submission of the business plan for the main Shared Prosperity Fund and also for the multiply element. So we've had confirmation last week. The multiply money is on its way, so that's making progress now. The bigger UK SPF programme will be coming back to go through our approval process and start hopefully to move into delivery in the next couple of months. You're absolutely right, government should be confirming this month, and they assured us that would happen despite the changes that are taking place this week. But a very interesting question when you say to look at our funding the round. And we've certainly tried, we started that last year with each investment priority, we put gain share against it, and we did try to also put other funding against it. I will read into that in action for us to come back to the next meeting, if not sooner, with a bit of an overview of the various funding streams we've got, in effect the levers we've got that we use. So I think people are probably aware of them, but we probably need to package them up together to make it really clear how they all fit together, because the gain share is one route into these projects, but actually other funding is as well, whether it's CRSTS or the TCF money or the UK SPF. So we'll try and do a bit of a funding position and show you what funding you have available to fund activities next year.
That would be really useful and needed, what is actually potentially coming down the track. Mark?
Simply just to follow up, I 100% agree with the Mayor's comments on the cost of living crisis and what we can do to respond. I just want to also flag it's a cost of doing business crisis as well, in particular for sectors which are more exposed to energy price increases after the tumultuous time they've had for the last few years. So just to keep that on the agenda as well. And I think that the UK SPF plus gain share debate, we have options that we could use to extend and further business support locally, as well as petition nationally for more substantive support and help for our business in the region.
I don't know if anyone saw the statistics from Lanes, our favourite coffee shop, and they pay $1,400 for their energy, and it went up to 56,000 or something, and it's just, you just can't continue. And if that's happening all across West Yorkshire, businesses are going to keel over, aren't they? So it's really important that we see what happens on Thursday and what the offer is for this price cap, and hopefully it will extend to business as well as families and individuals. Jane, you wanted to come in.
Thank you. I just wanted to reinforce the point that you made. It cannot be business as usual in terms of the Combined Authorities' activities during the cost of living crisis. We have to actually keep that in mind in terms of all of these initiatives. I normally look at a Q1 report with a bit of sort of scepticism, thinking, well, okay, this is all going to change. But actually, this time, we really need to be very clear and very planned in terms of each funding segment of how we take into account the context. It just can't be business as usual.
I totally agree, and I've asked for a group of officers, one from each team, to work together closely to deliver at speed those solutions, because we can't be waiting for the next CA meeting in December or whatever in order to make decisions. So we need to be as agile as we can, but obviously let's just see what unfolds, because if there is a cap and if businesses are protected, our intervention is different to if businesses are going to go to the wall hand over fist. So I just take a breath until we see what government are going to offer. But you're absolutely right. We can't just sit in our hands. Back to you, Angela.
Thank you. So picking up, I think, from para 2.9, just to confirm, in Appendix 2, you have the current position on spend on bus tendered services. When we went to the Combined Authority last time, there was approval to alignment between the concessions budget and the bus tendered services budget, following an element of overspend last year and then further changes in year. As part of that, making that alignment, we said we would ensure there was regular, very clear monitoring of spend in that area. So the Appendix 2 is the first of those regular monitoring, which shows the revised budget, which was increased by 2.1 million, and it shows spend since then in line with that budget. Having said that, other things have come forward since then, and there is a paper on Friday's Combined Authority seeking a further alignment to reflect some of the changes over the summer that have taken place, and we can go into that in more detail on Friday at the Combined Authority meeting. But we'll build that into that appendix so you can keep track of that, and we said we'd do that to provide the comfort that this was being carefully monitored, and we will keep just sticking it into this this paper so it's there for you to be aware that's happened.
I would say that the bus payments is quite volatile, this, isn't it? So it is a moving picture, dependent on obviously numbers as well. And if we can get that 10% increase, that's going to make a big difference to our income. But yes, it is quite volatile.
It is. There are lots of moving parts to it with government funding, with the Mayor's Fairs being launched, the activities out there on the street, whether people can afford to travel at all. It's the forecasting is extremely difficult this year, but we have to do it. We all have to set a budget based on some assumptions, and we'll bring those back to you. We've included a quarter one update on the capital programme, and the report from sort of page 7 onwards goes through the key funding streams that we've got. I think picking up on the previous conversation about having to rethink some of these, a chunk of them are transport and transport only. It was funding from government for transport, so they will continue to be channelled that way. I think it's helpful for us though to bring forward, as we said before, those funding pots where we have more discretion over which direction they're spent. So an update there on City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, which is getting underway. Transforming Cities continues to be challenging in terms of spend by the original deadline of next year, but that's now been rolled into the CRSTS programme. Getting Building Fund is almost there, was due to finish this year, and we had agreement to carry particularly one project over into the current year. Brownfield Housing is making good progress, and we have included here in Appendix 3 the position on the gain share, which picks up on the points previously, but reflects the original allocations made earlier this year against each of the investment priorities, some of which have been subsequently turned into firm approvals for specific projects, which are set out in that appendix, and some are pipeline funding, which is still in development, and they're at different stages. So some of the climate projects are coming quite close, I think, to coming forward. Others are taking a little longer to come together. That was the first 4 years of gain share that we committed indicatively, but they're indicative allocations and they can be reopened, reconsidered and altered as the Mayor and members would like.
Thank you, Angela. Any comments? Happy to move on, Angela? Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. So agenda item 6, corporate planning and performance. And thank you very much, Lorna, for the revised document from our conversation. So over to you, Lorna.
Thank you, Chair. This is the regular monthly update that I provide around corporate planning and performance. I'll take the report as read, and I'm aware that we've got a very substantial appendix of about 14 pages, I think, with the KPIs at the end. So this focuses on the progress with the corporate key performance indicators. We've included the Q1 dashboard there with a brief update alongside that on the risk strategy review. By way of summary, that Q1 performance dashboard that's provided at Appendix 1, progress has been outlined against a RAG rating of red, amber, green, so that you can get a feel for where the progress is being applied on each of those KPIs. It's worth noting that good progress has been made on certain KPIs. Other KPIs will need a focus on mitigations to address some of the challenges across the sector that we're all aware of that are arising, particularly around funding, energy, supplier costs, and some of the things that the Mayor has alluded to earlier in the agenda. Being in Q1, some of those may be rated amber, which means that we're working towards achieving the goal, but we haven't quite achieved it yet. So you'll see further progression throughout Q2, Q3 and Q4. As is customary, the Combined Authority are really keen to strengthen our equality, diversity and inclusion measures as the golden thread that runs through our KPI reporting. We also include that within the risk planning cycle as well. Angela's already mentioned that we're looking at some in-year revisions to our business planning cycle, and we've also started in earnest the business planning cycle for 23-24. So at the moment, directorates are looking at business plans for the year ahead. So whilst we've had quite a lot of change in this year itself, 22 to 23, we are also looking to project ahead, and we'll do that alongside the budget setting cycle to make sure that those two processes are really coherently linked. In terms of the review of the corporate risk strategy, so I provided regular updates back at this meeting to give you a flavour of where that's up to and how things are progressing. We've taken a report very recently to Governance and Audit Committee. We've taken some reports to the Strategic Leadership Board and some of our internal management meetings as well. We've collated the feedback and come up with a strong plan of action. The feedback's been really supportive of the approach to date, and it focuses on strengthening the escalation process in particular, having a complete revisal of all of our internal mechanisms and raising awareness platforms alongside looking at our templates to make sure that we're looking at best practice whenever we plan ahead. We've also looked to differentiate this year, something we've not done before, between risks that have the potential to arise as opposed to risks that have actually been realised, because some of our risks are, potentially high chance of, something that would have a really large impact on the organisation and the potential to arise, whereas other risks we're actually living through at the moment, such as the rising cost of energy. So this is two areas that we're really looking to separate out, and there's been some very positive feedback about that. Like I said, you've got Appendix 1 that outlines the Q1 dashboard, and I'll pause there to see if we've got any questions or any feedback on those two updates.
Thank you. It's incredibly helpful to have a sort of colour coding. But it does seem to me that part of the challenge is around procurement. And I wonder, is there anything we can say about how we're going to solve that problem? So, for example, the Fair Work Charter, we're committed to delivering it, but the one of the challenges there was the procurement function, the capacity constraints around procurement. So do you see that as a challenge going forward across departments?
I think it's probably safe to say that in terms of procurement, particularly given the pressures on that area of business this year because of the changes with the funding streams, there have been a lot of new pipelines that the team have had to work to plan in. That alongside any pressures that it may put on teams in terms of capacity and other support services, corporate planning and performance, for example, HR, finance. Whenever we take on a new work stream within the Combined Authority, or if things change in year outside of the original business plans that we'd agreed and signed off, then that will always have an impact on quite a number of teams within the area. In terms of procurement itself, maybe Angela can give a little bit more in-depth detail on that.
Angela.
Yes, thank you. Lorna's absolutely right. It's often the corporate teams who then catch up have to run to catch up and slot in new work when new conventions are planned. Our commercial procurement team, it was staffed up to do a certain number of procurements in the year. That's been exceeded. There just has been more work coming in. As part of that, Faye, who's joining us imminently for the next item, Faye has restructured her team and she's been trying to recruit to a larger team to provide the support. It is a very difficult market to recruit from at the moment, and I think that's common to everybody. It's not unique to the Combined Authority. So there are some vacancies in the team. However, Faye's also looking at the way our contract standing orders operate to look at whether we need to move some of the limits in terms of where it is left to managers to do the procurement with self-service support from commercial, and where the procurement team get more involved to make sure that we are getting best value from the contracts we put out there. I think there's also more we can always do around frameworks and about people thinking ahead perhaps to the sorts of things they might be wanting to do in the future, and having contracts set up for that. So the Faye and team are definitely trying to do that. Once the team is fully up to speed, will help. Sorry, fully up to capacity, fully recruited will help. But it is a problem, and certainly I think procurement is one of the areas where it's difficult to recruit. We've done quite well. We know other authorities are losing procurement people faster than we are. It's no great comfort to people who need that work to happen, but we are looking at ways we can try and make sure the processes are as agile as possible.
Great stuff, thank you. Have we got any comments from what we've heard so far? Yes, Mark.
Thank you, Beth. And just really a comment on the appendix overall and the RAG rating, because I guess Q1's always a difficult time to do a RAG rating, and there'll be some ambers which we're very confident in, and there'll be some that we actually think are getting worse. And what I've seen elsewhere is actually alongside the RAG rating, you have a trend. So you say, actually, this is an amber, but it's an amber minus, and we should be worried about it, or it's an amber, but it's an amber plus because we're quite confident. And I think in a 17-page appendix, that will help this group focus a bit more on the issues that really matter. I think that also ties in with the feedback that we gave at the Strategic Leadership Board about the risk register, because you've got some current issues which impact the current status today, which is the RAG, but then you have the future risks which probably align to that trend on the report. So a suggestion would be if we could incorporate that trend. I think it would just be helpful to dive into the ones that really need attention. Thank you.
I think that's a helpful suggestion. What do you think, Lorna?
I think that's great. We're really happy to incorporate that. So thank you. It's really useful for us to get feedback on the templates themselves, as well as, putting some context to the performance indicators. So yeah, we can absolutely have that for subsequent reports. Thank you.
Really helpful, thanks. Any further comments? Thank you. And that's a lot of work's gone into that, Lorna, so thank you very much for drawing that together. Moving on to item 7, just in time, Faye. Very timely, the Social Value Portal trial outcomes, and this is a good news story. Go for it.
Thank you. I presented to this committee previously about improving the visibility of social value and the social value that's achieved through procurement of the Combined Authority. We proposed to do this through the adoption of the TOMS framework, if you remember, and using that through the Social Value Portal. So since then we've been trialling the system and the TOMS. We've completed 7 procurements as part of that trial, and those procurements are of various sizes. There have been some teething issues that we've got to resolve. In particular, we need to make sure that we stay easy to do business with and don't overcomplicate the process or slow the process down. But in terms of the main focus of the trial, we can now report that we have achieved commitment to just over £435,000 worth of social value from those contracts, and that equates to about 24% of the contract value, which I think are fantastic results. Some examples of the kind of social value that we've achieved. We've got things about hiring local people to deliver the contracts, providing expert business advice to VCSEs, committed supply chain spend within the West Yorkshire region, equality and diversity training to staff, commitment to pay the real living wage, community days, and lots of things around sessions for young people and getting young people back into work, so mock interviews, advice around careers, etc., and school and college visits. So some really good examples of things that we at the Combined Authority are really keen to drive. overall, our suppliers have responded really well to the social value ask. The feedback I've had is that they recognise this as being a way for them to differentiate themselves. And they also recognise the softer benefits of being able to, I guess, win over the public's hearts and minds in terms of project delivery. That's come across quite strongly as well. From our own point of view, it's enabling us to maximise the benefits we get for the pot of money that we've got to spend, which is really important to driving value for money. And I think just the fact that we can report on social value, can actually say what it is that we're going to be able to deliver and the benefits that we can bring is a huge step forward as well. So in terms of next steps, we're reviewing the process, the documentation, and say just to make sure that it is accessible, succinct and straightforward. We're getting a new account manager at the Social Value Portal and we're revisiting our SLA with them. We're reviewing the TOMs to reduce the list further and really concentrate minds around what we want to achieve. And just continuing to apply the TOMs and the Social Value Portal to all of our procurements over £50,000. And then the most important thing will be managing the delivery of those commitments and making sure they actually happen and being able to report on that in the future. And then we'll look to review it again in 6 months' time. Okay.
Thank you, Faye. And it's great to hear. And I must say, the companies that I'm visiting across West Yorkshire, there is a real appetite for this because it's also about retention of staff. That the staff understand that this is a good company to work for with the same values that they share. So it's all good stuff. We should really amplify this, and I hope you've shared that with our comms team to do a good news story to share with either internally or externally, because it's good to hear.
Yes, we have a running comms programme around social value now, so we'll have something hopefully feeding in on a regular basis.
Great stuff. Any comments? Yes, Jane.
Just really in terms of that communication strategy, I think it's important in terms of access that we've got to trade press in terms of doing good business in West Yorkshire, really, rather than our usual routes of communication. You know, it's a way of actually having that dialogue with businesses, you know, and focusing on social value.
I think that's a really great suggestion. Good to do business with is the theme, isn't it? That we can make it simple and you can do something great for your colleagues and for your business and community. So we'll take that away. Thank you. Thank you, Jane. Any other business? Great. Thank you all for coming.